Welcome to the Republican Professor. This morning we have Rich Bordner, K through 12 high school teacher, critical thinking and logic and English and history, I believe, and high school wrestling coach for many, many years, distinguished service in the K through 12 system in California and now in Missouri, right?
Texas.
Sorry.
I'm from
Missouri. How did I get that wrong?
Well, I'm from Missouri. That's where I was born and raised. So
okay, yeah. Well, I was thinking misery, and then that makes sense. Texas, yes.
That doesn't even equate. Those two don't even go together.
Well, in the middle of July.
There you go.
Okay, fair enough.
So Rich is joining us from Texas. Is it the Dallas area?
Yeah, North Dallas.
Okay. And Curtis is in Texas as well. I don't know if Curtis wants to say the location of his mansion.
We're in North Dallas too. Yeah.
Okay. That's where his mansion is with all those books and the evil library where
we're
he
up here
hatches
on
plans.
Quarter acre ranch. Yep.
Okay.
And I'm in frozen California. As you can see clearly, I'm in my backyard.
It's a heck of
my dad's name, my dad was Mike San Francisco, and San Francisco was named after my grandfather. And his name was Isaiah San Francisco. They named the people after weird names back then. And my mom's name was Susan Marin, and Marin County is named after her. And so just the family history, here we are. I'm on my mom's side right now. Well, anyway, welcome, Rich. We're glad to have you.
It's an honor.
Yeah, it's an honor for us too. I'd like to share a warm anecdote about Rich. I have seen a workday for Rich. Actually, I didn't see the whole workday. I saw part of it. That was enough for me to see at a high school in Southern Orange County, where they have like Southern accents down there. They're like, boy, you down in the wrong part of Orange County, boy. You're in the southern part of Orange County, boy.
Like, whatever, man.
And that's right. Yeah, kids drive to school with guns, gun racks in their trucks and cowboy boots. There's rattlesnakes everywhere.
Southern California.
I can't remember the name of the school. Do you want to say the name of that school?
Yeah, I'll say the name of the school is Capo Valley High Schools in Mission Viejo.
Capo Valley.
Yeah.
Okay.
So cool. It's short for Capistrano Valley.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. So one of its many claims to fame is that was the high school where Todd Marinovich was from. I don't know if either of you guys are football fans.
Is that a Cold War reference, or was he
right about
defect from the Soviet Union?
He was a quarterback at USC. I don't know if he won a Heisman or something, but he was a really good quarterback in UFC in the early 90s, and then got drafted by the Raiders, and just had a lot of promise. And it just, long story short, didn't end up panning out, and kind of, fizzled for several reasons. But Todd Marinovich that's where the high school is where he's from. Anyway, useless trivia.
Well, I saw inside a day in the life and of Ivan Deniso K through 12ovich. And it was interesting. I mean, it was like time management on steroids. The number of keys that you had after class, we would go over to the wrestling area and you'd open all this stuff and show us where the guys worked out and the mats and you had a pretty big program in wrestling there, right? I mean, it seems like it was like, I want to say it was like 80 kids. Is that right? Or
no,
am I way off?
40? It was about half that.
40? Okay. Where'd I get 80 from? I must be living in the 80s. It must be just I missed the 80s. That's what it is. I miss Ronald Reagan. So so you had 40 kids, and how many of those were on varsity? How many were junior varsity?
Well, I can't remember exactly at that time, but you have 14 weight classes. And so you have 14 on varsity and then 14 on junior varsity and then 14 on your freshman, sophomore team. So I don't think we quite filled out a full squad on each level because, just doesn't really work out that way given the distribution of weights. You could have 5 guys at 112 or 114, whatever it was back then, but then you have nobody at the next weight class up, or you got nobody in your middle. So it can be like feast or famine. You have a bunch of kids at one weight class, but none at another. It doesn't automatically compute to, you got 14 kids and that means you have a full squad. Just doesn't work out like that.
Makes sense. Yeah, you can't take a huge kid and go, okay, you're a 120s now. Drop weight.
Mhm.
Don't drink water for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So how did you get into coaching wrestling?
Well, I'll
What's
tell
your
you this.
background? Did you
I'll tell you
wrestle?
this, yeah, I did. I wrestled in all the way from 4th grade all the way through college. So what is
Dude.
that? Do the math, like 13, 14 years. And then right out of college, I did a year coaching a freshman team in Ohio. It was a good time. And then I moved to California to do the philosophy program at Talbot, did that for a couple of years. And then I went and got a teaching credential because I figured at the pace I was going to be in a lot of debt if I didn't get a decent paying job pretty soon. So I went and got my teaching credential.
You thought ahead about that. That's good.
Yeah, well, it was because of a girl. I was dating a girl at the time, and one day she kind of said, like, what are you gonna do for your future? You got to get this figured out if you're gonna marry me. So I didn't end up marrying her, but I do thank her for kicking me in the rear and getting me going. So
Cool.
anyway, my first teaching job was in Compton. I taught there for 3 years, and that is also where I started volunteer coaching. And it was kind of a unique situation because I just kind of fell into it. And I wouldn't really call it, normal coaching experience. That's not because the guy that I was coaching with, he was a good guy. He was actually in my wedding when I got married. But we were just kind of trying to fly by the seat of our pants and do as best we could in a really, really, really weird environment. So it was just kind of
Which gang were you in Compton?
I was in the bald guy gang. The old fuddy-duddy bald guy gang.
For those who cannot see this because they're listening on audio, Rich is bald.
Yep.
But he still looks really young. So there you go. You got that going.
So that's where I started my teaching career and got a little bit of coaching under my belt. But normally if you're going to be a head coach, what you would do is you would coach for several years under, kind of like an apprenticeship where you would learn from a head coach who was, established and whatnot. And I just never got that. So at the end of that 3 years, I got a head coaching job at Capital Valley. It just kind of came up out of nowhere. At that time, there weren't a whole lot of teaching jobs. So I was kind of thinking.
What year was that?
That was, oh shoot, it was like 2007, 2008, something like that. I was moving on from Compton. I was not going to teach there anymore.
So you came straight out of Compton?
I did. Yeah. But I was just planning on.
You teed that up beautifully, and we didn't even talk about that beforehand.
Walk right into that one. I thought that I was going to start my marriage off by just sub-teaching and coaching by the school that was right by where our apartment was going to be.
Oh, so you were the head coach, but you weren't a teacher there yet.
No. The head coach job came up and I applied for it. And I didn't think I was going to get it because there weren't that many jobs. There was very, very, very few teaching jobs actually. So on my honeymoon, I got a call from them. And my interview was the day that I got back from my honeymoon. My wife and I were moving into our apartment together. And I remember driving to the interview in a U-Haul truck, like this big giant 20-foot U-Haul truck. I pull up to the school, get out in my suit and tie, do the interview. I didn't think I got the job because it was like 3 or 4 weeks and I didn't hear from them, And then all of a sudden, a couple of days before school started, they called me, said, "Hey, you want the job?" And I said, "Of course," and just jumped right in, and had no clue what I was doing, but that's how I started coaching, just kind of on a whim.
So
was
you
it was it coaching and teaching, or just
Yeah.
a straight coaching job?
Yeah, it was coaching and teaching. 'Cause
Okay.
I wouldn't have applied for it if it wasn't a full-time teaching job. That my intention was to, use the coaching to kind of get my foot in the door in a school.
Okay. Cool.
Ended up, making it a thing for 9 years, almost a decade.
Isn't that kind of weird for the kids though, if it's just your foot in the classroom? I mean, it's, I would
you and your
feel,
math
I would
rhythm.
be weirded out.
Uh,
Like, what's going on here? What? I
As
know he's from
opposed to-
Compton, but
as opposed to an ear or a nose in the door.
well, okay, I haven't even finished my anecdote.
Okay.
I saw Rich in action teaching critical thinking and logic to, I think they were seniors. Correct me. I don't know. Not juniors. They were upper. They weren't younger. They weren't the freshman and sophomores. Um, and it was about, seemed like it was about 10 minutes of 10, 11 minutes of solid and uninterrupted instruction where you had most of them, which is pretty good. That's pretty good. It's better. It's more than the Prager University videos. And then there'd be like some discussion and then maybe some distraction and then another 7, 8 minutes solid of instruction. And so I think they were coming out with a good 20 some minutes of solid logic that they would have never gotten otherwise, really chewing and thinking. And see, the thing about high school kids, it's different with high school kids than college. You do lose them faster, it seems like. And this is just, I mean, obviously I'm talking to the king right here, but I've taught in high schools too. I taught college in high school in the LAUSD. And in my experience, it fits with my experience. You lose them faster, but when you have them on a deeper level than you do the college kids. You're making a deeper impact.
So what do you mean by that? Like, what is it? When you say, like, be a little more specific.
It seems like they are taking in if you have them. What I mean by that is they're paying attention, right?
You've earned their respect in some way, or their
besides the kid over there sleeping,
yeah,
which happened in my classes, because there's no discipline. Where Democrats reign, there is no discipline, generally speaking. And the Los Angeles Unified School District is no exception. But there were probably most of the class, I would say 80%, when you have them, you can tell that what you're saying to them is life-changing. That was my experience. Obviously, I can't follow up, but anyway, it seemed like that was happening in your class, although I did see a lot of people pretending to be skeptical just to try to push the boundaries or try to, it's their parents' issue, their parents tell them what to do, and they probably say the same thing to their parents. And
so with the college kids you teach, they're paying attention, but they just don't value it as much. Is that what you're saying? Or they blow it off more? I'm just trying to see if I understand you correctly.
Seems like with the college kids, generally speaking, if you have them, they're a little bit more distracted. Colleges, I think, are you have them on a more shallow level because you don't have them every day. You have them for maybe an hour. You have them every day, right? Your kids?
Now I do, but back at Capo, it was block schedule. So it was
blocks. Okay.
It was 2.5 days a week.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah. So it was more like a college.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I was just really impressed with the work you did and with the constraints that you had, including the administrative crap that they had you doing all the time, it seems like you were always juggling like two things at once. You were like either taking roll or calling a parent and teaching the class at the same time. I don't know what you were doing, but you were able to juggle a lot, it seemed like, and manage the classroom well. And you didn't even have to resort to corporal punishment. I remember when you pulled me off a kid when I was just slapping this kid silly, slapping the taste out of his mouth, and you said, you're like, no, we don't do that. And I was like, not even with the fly swatter. And you pull the fly swatter out of my hand, and the kid, he had tears welling up, and his face was starting to welt and bruise. And you're like, yeah, not even here. And you said sorry to the kid. He had some dead flies kind of stuck on his face and pancake. But no, okay, I'm making all of that up, but
you remember that well.
I have a rich fantasy life. Okay. Yeah. So, but you had, the kids obviously respected you. You were obviously highly respected on campus by the kids. Walking from the classroom over to the wrestling, kids were constantly coming up to you, talking to you, asking you advice. They clearly looked up to you, and if you told them to do something, they would do it. So that's what I observed. So as soon as we started this podcast, I knew I wanted to have like the K through 12 focus on here, because that's you're bringing us who we get in college. I was like, I gotta have Rich on. I gotta find Rich. Where is he?
And you tracked me down. Yeah, man.
How long were you at Capo?
I was at Capo for 9 years. Yeah.
And you were a wrestling coach for the whole time?
Mm-hmm.
How many hours a week did you work?
Well, it depends on the time of year. I actually calculated this because I was curious. October through early March, it's about 80 hours a week. And then March through June is about 60. And then July and August the summer break would be about 40. So that's kind of what you're looking at. A lot of it is, it wasn't just coaching, head coach at the high school level, but I had to run a youth program as well. I wasn't the coach in the room all the time, at least in the winter. I had another staff do that, but I was kind of administrating and doing things in the background. So that's still, it all added up.
Rich, take us through a typical day. What time would you show up?
Are you talking about a weekday or a weekend?
Yeah, typical weekday when you would teach.
Okay, all right. So I'll actually do you one better. I'll give you both. So it depends on whether there's a competition that day or not. So if there's not a competition, usually I would get to work at about 6:30 and hit the ground running. So give me enough time to do about an hour to hour and a half of, administrative work, doing emails and calls and setting stuff up for, future competitions or whatever else I need to do from a wrestling end, and sometimes for my classes and planning and grading and stuff. And then 8 to 12:30-ish would be classes. So I would do, they were on block schedule back at Capo. And then the afternoon, 12:30 to whenever school let out, that would be either what I call my prep period, which would be, grading and planning and stuff like that. Or it would be every other day. So like Monday, Wednesday, it'd be a planning period, but then Tuesday, Thursday, it would be, we'd have practice. And so we would go practice, do freshman practice from 1 to 3, and then the upper level guys would be lifting and conditioning, and then 3 to 5 we would flip it. The upper level guys would have their practice, and the freshman guys would do their conditioning and lifting and stuff like that. And then after that,
And you're supervising the lifting and everything. You're supervising both things going on at the same time.
no, I had some other coaches that would run the freshman practice. And so they would run the freshman practice and the freshman lifting, but I would do the upper level varsity guys lifting and then their practice. So it wasn't just a one-man show. I had a staff guys that were really good and, added a lot of help. So I don't want to make it look like it was just all on me, because it wasn't. They did a lot of work too.
And it was a 2-day-a-week practice.
No, it would be every day, but on the off days, like when we didn't have practice at 1 o'clock, we would just have it later after school.
Oh, I got you.
So on those days, you would just get home later. So on days where you had practice at 1 o'clock, you would get home. I'd get home about 6 or 5:30, 6 o'clock. And then on the days where you had to wait till after school, you just get home a little bit later, 6:30, 7 o'clock, something like that.
What in my high school, when we wrestled, it was the same schedule every day. And so practice was just after school.
Yeah.
And you were there till 7.
Yeah, well, the block schedule made it different because, you can't, in block scheduling, you can't have every period every day. You only have some periods on some days. And so that kind of made it different schedule.
So you get there, tell me at what time you got there again.
About 6:30 a.m.
6:30, keys in the hand.
Mhm.
And then what time are you leaving typically?
About 6 o'clock, 6 or 6:30 in the evening.
And for those who don't know, when you do wrestling, you have tournaments on Saturday. You still do that, right?
Friday and Saturday. Yeah,
Friday
they'd be
and
2 day
Saturday. Oh, I didn't
Yeah,
know
they'd
that.
be 2-day events.
Oh,
So that's
we
why
only
I
had
said
ours on Saturday.
it depends on whether you got a competition or not. Because if you've got a tournament on a weekend, usually they're 2-day affairs because they're a bunch of teams, 40, 50 teams in a tournament. And so it would start, you'd have Friday weigh-ins, maybe 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock, and then you'd start the tournament at 11. Friday, you would get done pretty late. Maybe if the tournament was well run and efficient, you would get done about 7 or 8 in the evening. But if it was inefficient and kind of running slow, you'd get done, 10:30 at night on Friday, and then you'd do it all over again on Saturday.
Wow.
So they're not going to school on Fridays?
Yeah, correct.
Wow.
I think I missed that part. I didn't know that. We went to school on Fridays and then we had this tournaments on Saturdays all day. Now, are you driving the bus on Saturday? Who's driving the bus?
No. Okay, this was kind of a complicated thing. So first couple of years, we'd have bus drivers and whatnot, but then there were some budget cuts in our district, and they made us start paying for buses, like our booster clubs. And so we just did away with the buses and did like a carpool. So I think when you came around, we were probably still doing the carpool.
It
yeah.
seemed like it was an affair to get everybody there. And, it wasn't
just-
like
just-
the
just getting
bus
people
leaves
to
at
show
this
up.
time, get your ass on the bus.
Yeah, even getting people just to show up on time, not either sleep in or flake or be overweight and making an excuse about it, or mommy calling us up 5 minutes before the carpool had to leave and saying, Tommy's got a little sniffle and is not going to be competing today. There was always. I don't know if I ever had.
Nowadays, you tell them to just put a mask on. I'll put a shot in his arm, put a damn mask on.
Oh man.
And get out there on the mat.
Yeah, Lucas, I don't know if I ever had a single competition where everybody that was scheduled to be in the competition actually was there in the competition.
Oh.
There was always somebody missing.
Yeah.
Usually more than one.
So how are you managing all of that? How are you managing the excuses and pushing these kids to excel, helping them to discover their non-douchey self? How do you do that?
I don't know.
You must have the patience of Job.
No, I didn't. I was actually pretty short fused.
Awesome.
I mean,
tell me more. Tell us more. That probably worked, actually.
I
I
can't
think
give
it
you
probably
an
works.
answer to that. I can't give you an answer to that question because I really don't know. Like, I never was able to figure out how to, and I'm not trying to denigrate myself or put myself down. I'm just being honest. I really don't think I figured out how to motivate well.
Hmm.
There was always,
Maybe it's impossible for that age group.
well, I don't know. I've seen some coaches who are really good at it, and I tried to learn from them and emulate what they did. But I think let me put it
I'm
this way.
skeptical.
Yeah, well,
I'm
let's put
very
it this way.
skeptical.
In coaching, I learned a lot about myself. All right, I learned that I wasn't the hotshot motivator, awesome coach that I thought I was. So it was a really, if I could put it in a nutshell and summarize the whole 9 years, it was a really humbling experience, and it knocked me down a peg or two, and it put me in touch with the weaker parts of myself. So that was one of them. Like you figure like, oh, I know how to reach this kid, or I know how to reach these kids and this team and get this team motivated and on the right track. But every time you try something and go down the road, there's this massive curveball that comes your way and hits you upside the head, and something happens that you just didn't expect, or a kid reacts a certain way that you didn't see that coming, and you're back to the drawing board. And I had that happen so many times, So
Do you have an example that you want to share with us, or do you want to move on to something else?
Okay.
I don't want to pressure you to share something. I know it's kind of
fine.
sensitive because these
Or,
are
or something.
they
something
were
you learned
minors. They're
from-
not minors anymore, but they were minors at
Well,
the time.
Something
I'll
you learned
say
from-
this. I won't be specific because I can't think of a specific story right now. But typically,
Just give us their student number, and then I'll,
Yeah.
we'll do it that
Well,
way.
here's one that would just really wrap me around the axle, and it happened a lot. You pour into a kid for a couple of years, and just when he's getting good, just when he is getting to the point where he is going to experience the fruits of his labor, and you are going to experience the fruits of his labor with him.
Oh, I can see where this is going, and I'm
comes out of
scared to
nowhere.
hear it.
Well, I just said it. He quits. It just comes out of nowhere. Like, you don't expect it. Like, one day he's on top of the world, having fun, doing good. And he's like, man, I love this sport. And then literally the very next day, he comes up to you, and usually he doesn't come up to you. Usually he just like stops
Doesn't
showing
show
up,
up. Yeah.
and they don't face you, or
Yeah.
you get a text message, or the parent will tell you, or something like that.
Funny how
And
that works.
there's no talking the kid out of it, and just that happens so many times,
Oh my gosh. How many times would you say that happened?
Well, if you start,
Over a dozen?
oh yeah, if you have a freshman class of 20, which is pretty good for wrestling. But let's say you have a freshman class of 20. Maybe about 2 or 3 of those kids will make it to their senior year. That was my odds. I mean, the other coaches had better odds, but that was my numbers. That was my numbers. Having a senior class of 2, 3, 4 kids was not at all abnormal.
Did you ever figure out, was there a typical reason? Was it drugs? Was it a girl? Was it family pressure? Was it just being tired? What was it, do you think?
Well, wrestling's a tough sport. Wrestling's a hard sport. It's hard to make.
Anybody who's ever wrestled knows exactly what you're talking about. People who've never wrestled, they don't know what you're talking about.
Well, it's fun, but there's always a part of it, probably most of it, that's not fun in the way that they define fun.
Right.
So it's fun when
if you define fun as, fun, then, it's not fun. But like, if you redefine it like marriage or something, and like you add a bunch of shit that's not fun, then it is pretty fun.
Exactly.
What drew you to wrestling? Because you got the ears, and I remember the first time I saw you, I was like, oh, he's a wrestler. I could tell. So
Yeah.
You've obviously been wrestling for like a century or something by that time. You're fairly short. I'm going to describe you for people who are not being able to see this. I'd say your weight right now is you'd be 160s, 160 maybe. I don't know.
Thank you. Add about 30 pounds of that.
Come on. You're like a little fire hydrant, and I wouldn't want to wrestle you. I guarantee you. So, and you're clearly very good in your technique. You probably still can wrestle the hell out of 99% of the population. You wrestled in college, right? Collegiate.
Yep.
What college did you wrestle for?
The Ohio State University.
I've heard of that school. Where is that?
That's in Ohio.
Okay.
That's
Is it
a
Columbus,
it's in the
big-
state of Ohio?
Columbus, Ohio, to be exact.
They're big in wrestling too. Yeah, it's a big deal.
Yep.
Okay, we're not going to focus on the name Columbus and how racist that is. We'll just move on. Ohio, did you wrestle all 4 years?
5. Yeah, because you get
A
4
red
years plus a red shirt.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Plus a
I
what? I
wasn't
missed
like
that. I
a-
missed that. What you got a plus a what? What was
A
that?
red shirt year. A red shirt is when you're on the team, you practice with the team, but you don't compete for the team. You can go to open competitions, but you're kind of on your own competitions. So it's just a year to kind of mature physically before you actually start competing for the team.
What weight classes were you in college?
I was in 149 my first 4 years, and then my last year I was 157.
Okay. And so you clearly did not have a drunken party experience at the Ohio State University. You were not chugging the brew. You weren't doing the typical bong hits and all that.
Correct.
Obviously, because there's no way anybody could survive even a looking at a practice, let alone the practice in that condition, and not to mention the
Well,
weight issue.
You'd be surprised. There were I was on a team with some party animals where I remember a couple times we had 8 a.m. Saturday practice, and I got drunk by wrestling them. So, you know,
They were
Fun. That's when you eat garlic the night before.
on
A
here,
lot
man.
of it.
Yeah.
So what's what was your major in high school? Or sorry, college?
I started. I got a degree in English, and then along the way picked up another in philosophy. So I was a double major.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Your English is very good. I can understand you pretty well. And I'm a native speaker.
Ain't got no grammar mistakes around here.
So how did you so you're a philosopher as a wrestler. How did you get into philosophy?
Okay, so that's a story. When I first got to college, I was a brand new Christian. I had just given my life to Christ a couple months before, and so didn't know hardly anything. It's still largely the case, but even worse back then. First week in college, I bumped into 2 guys that changed the trajectory of my life. They were in InterVarsity Christian Fellowship, and they got me plugged into the various groups there on campus. Ironically, one of them was named Darwin. So, Darwin, if you're out there, love you. You
That's
changed
his
my-
first name?
That was his first name, Darwin. Yeah, man.
Don't
Crazy.
tell me his last name was Charles. Don't tell me. Don't tell me his last name was comma Charles.
I forget his last. It was Wu, wasn't it? I forget his last name. He was an Asian guy. So they got me plugged in, and my roommate that year was an agnostic guy. He was really smart and would just pepper me with questions, and I didn't know how to answer them. So it got to the point where I either had to fish or cut bait. I had to like figure out answers to this guy's questions and to the questions and challenges that I was getting in the larger campus in my classes at the time, or I had to leave. I had to leave the faith because I didn't want just a placebo, you know? So that's where I got into apologetics. Right around November, October, my freshman year, I went to William Lane Craig debate. That was when he debated Peter Atkins, and I saw that for the first time. Going into that debate, I was really scared. I was like, you know, how, you know, the Christian guys, they're all about faith, and the atheists, they're all about science, you know, so how is this going to work out? You know, I kind of had the stereotype in my head. but Craig just absolutely cleaned house and did really well. So it came out of that debate was like, maybe there's something to this. Maybe my faith can survive on campus and find answers to these questions. And so through all that, that's when I started taking philosophy classes. I took a one-on-one class as part of that, larger search. And the guy that taught the class afterwards, he pulls me aside. He's like, hey, you should think about taking more classes because you'd be really good at this. So I said, okay. So I took another class, and that led to another, and which led to another. It just kind of snowballed from there after that first one-on-one class.
That's impressive. I mean,
just kept
yeah.
liking I just kept liking the classes and enjoying myself. And so it eventually became a minor and then became a major after,
Very cool.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
I don't think I ever had a teacher in any subject pull me aside and say, you should do more of this.
Yeah. I don't know what he saw or why he said that, but he did. And so that little thing just was enough to get me to take the next step,
Yeah, that's cool. That kind of speaks to the influence of a teacher student relationship.
Yeah.
So he must have been pretty cool in your mind. You must have connected with him as a teacher for you to take that advice. Like,
yeah,
what was that class like?
I remember he looked a lot like Jesus. So there was that, he had the long hair and the beard, at least the stereotype of Jesus. I don't remember much about that class, honestly. I do remember that the book that we used in the class was all about Star Trek. So it was like it was using Star Trek to kind of delve into some, mind body problem type questions. And I think I wrote my paper. I don't remember what I said in the paper, but I wrote it on compatibilism in terms of free will versus determinism.
Interesting.
And he thought it was good and just said, hey, consider making this a thing. So I did.
Very cool.
And it was, at that point in time, hopefully your audience is encouraged by this, or at least this makes them think, because I know that apologetics and philosophy tends to get a bad rap in the larger Christian culture. Like a lot of youth pastors that I run into and a lot of parents that I run into in my ministry that I do, they're like, that just teaches kids to be argumentative. We don't want that. We want them.
You're like, no, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. Prove it. Prove it with facts.
Exactly. So they got the stereotype of apologetics as just like leading people to be argumentative and kind of that guy. And at least for me, it was such a life raft. I would not have survived college without it. Period.
Yeah.
Because I was getting bombarded with questions and issues everywhere that I went that I had nobody ever taught me the answer to. And I had to look for a life raft, and I found it in guys like William Lane Craig and JP Moreland. And
those were our professors, just
Yeah.
for everybody to know that you later went to study with them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, that's why I went to Biola, because they had influenced my thinking as an undergrad, and I just wanted to have the experience of sitting at their feet and learning from them,
Yeah.
So the point is that for like right now in the church, it's well known that we have a formation problem. A lot of kids who are raised in solid Christian homes and go to solid Christian churches and are very active in their youth group, they get to college, in a year or two, they walk away. And answering the why is a complicated issue, but one of the big reasons why is because they're just not really formed and catechized well in the faith and in the Bible. And so their roots go an inch deep, and that was me. That was me when I got to college. And what would have happened if I didn't have apologetics and philosophy? I would have been a number. I would have walked away.
Yeah.
So parents, youth leaders, you need to pay attention to apologetics and philosophy. You need to give your kids that stuff, because it's perseverance. It helps them persevere when the doubts come.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there's gonna get off my soapbox, but that was my story.
That's awesome.
What classes did you take in philosophy? Do you recall? Did you take metaphysics? Did you take epistemology?
At Ohio State,
Yeah.
it really wasn't structured like that, like it was at Talbot, where, at Talbot, they're teaching you first philosophy, like how to do philosophy. At Ohio State, it was, you're not going to take metaphysics and epistemology. You're going to take ancient Greek philosophy, or you're going to take 20th century philosophy, or you'll take a class on the philosophy of mind, like the mind-body problem, different issues like that, or meta-ethics. But it really wasn't that kind of, hey, you're in a class on metaphysics, so let's learn how to do metaphysics as a philosopher. It really wasn't that sort of thing.
Mm. It was more topical or historical.
Yeah, both topical and historical. Yeah.
How did your training at the Ohio State University prepare you for the classes you had at Biola at the graduate level? Did you feel like you were able to hang pretty well in those classes that we had at Biola? Or did you feel underwater?
I mean, a little bit underwater. I think everybody does, or most people do at Talbot, even if you have a background in philosophy.
Oh yeah.
I think I was underwater, but maybe not as much as somebody who was like brand new to the enterprise, or was maybe coming from like a business background or something. But it was still a big old drink from a fire hydrant.
For sure.
Yeah.
My undergrad, I have a degree in philosophy, and I did that at Biola, and the then went into the grad program. And I was still like, whoa, I felt like I had to work a lot harder than a lot of people.
Yeah. It's just a lot of reading, a lot of writing, and and like I was saying earlier, they're coming at it from a different angle. They're actually teaching you how to do philosophy rather than, all right, let's read Kant and what his views are. It's totally. I guess if I could give an analogy, it would be like you've learned Spanish fluently, but now you got to go back and learn Latin. So there's a little bit of a carryover, right? Some of the words are familiar, but still it's a totally different ballgame. You're still learning a brand new language, even though you know Spanish fluently. Latin's Latin.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, there's different ways of teaching philosophy. The different programs have different modalities of orientations, I suppose. Some are figure-based. You take a class on Descartes, Kant, Hume, something like that. Some are topic-based. Some people have a historical approach to the topics, and some people just have a topical approach. Our at Biola was a analytic tradition, unapologetically, ironically, analytic, and we didn't take courses on like Hume and Kant and so you just had to, those names were thrown in there and you had to figure out who's on what side on this debate. And it was pretty much, we were reading contemporary people with the exception of Dave Horner, when he taught ancient and medieval ethics, then that was specifically Aristotle and Aquinas and people who wrote about Aristotle and Aquinas now. But so yeah, that's what I've noticed about it was we didn't have a history of philosophy at Biola. You just had to kind of ingest that. So if you had history of philosophy before you got there, like you did, Curtis, like, because that's required as undergrad in Biola. Right. You took probably Dave Chalky for ancient.
Oh yeah.
Maybe who did you have for modern and medieval?
There was a gentleman there named Del Hansen that taught that at that time. But yeah, it was broken up into ancient, medieval, and modern, and contemporary. By the way, did you see that Chalky got back to us and he's going to be on? Oh no, I didn't. Yep. That's awesome. Yep. So that's going to be great. Well, okay, so how long
were you teaching at Capo before you were able to teach some philosophy in your class, like some logic and critical thinking? Was that right away, or did you have to kind of weasel your way into that?
I think it was a couple of years because we started a research paper project it was a research paper, but it was also at the same time like a debate project. So the kids would choose topics and they would write a paper on it, but they would also engage in a class debate on it. And then through that, I started to work in the logic angle to kind of help them become better arguers. And I think that was like 3 or 4 years into it or something like that. Yeah. But that was fun trying to get them to.
What's it like teaching philosophy in high school? Like,
Well,
what
now
is
I
it?
actually,
Is it worthwhile? Can they benefit from it?
oh yeah. Now I actually teach a philosophy class.
Oh, that's really cool.
Yeah. So my entire time at Capo, I just taught English. And then when I came to Texas, I did a year in the English second language department, the ESL department, but then moved to the English department after that and picked up a philosophy elective along the way. So I actually directly teach a whole class of philosophy now. And it's fun. Yeah. It's really beneficial to them, at least judging from what they say and the feedback they give. They find it a practical course and very valuable to them, and not just like a GPA grab. Like they're interested in it. So, yeah. Short answer to your question.
That's phenomenal to be able to get an opportunity to teach logic in that course.
Yeah,
That's great.
yeah. I actually used to in that course. I actually used to have a whole 4 to 5 week unit on it, but the last 2 years I've taken that out and we just do other things. But it's still kind of, you know how mom and dad blends the broccoli in with your smoothie. It's kind of
Yeah.
like that. I'll sprinkle it in there here and there. Still.
Well, I've long said, you probably would agree, one of the problems with our education system is when is taking logic out of schools in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
So that's good.
Yeah,
Critical thinking.
they need it.
Yeah.
They need it.
So you're working 80 hours a week when you were wrestling.
Mm-hmm.
80 hours. That's
Yeah.
like lawyer. Are you making lawyer money at this time?
Nope.
So a lot of people don't know how are coaches paid. Do you feel like sharing? I mean, just because people have no idea, like they might think a head coach, oh, you are getting paid pretty well, like, 150. You're pulling down $150 for 80 hours.
The rules are you get a stipend, which is
that's usually what the word they use when they're going to pay you some bullshit amount.
It works.
You're going to get a stipend. It's a stipend.
The head coach is a little bit more than assistant coaches, but it works out to about, for a full season, I don't want to give you exact numbers, but it works out to about half a month's pay. And so you get that for a full season. So you can get that in the winter and you can get that in the spring.
You're talking like a few grand, basically.
Yeah. Yeah. Per season.
Enough for like a used car, like a used Corolla.
Maybe in the 80s or 90s.
A used. Yeah, actually, I don't even know what the used market is. When I say used, I mean like, I guess I should specify. Back in my day, a used Corolla meant it ran. It went to you could drive it to the grocery store. Not what it means now, which is I bought it last year and I can't afford the payments. Well, so you're basically doing this for free. Basically.
Yeah.
Come on. That's what's happening.
Early.
Man, you do get a little bit of pay, but you're not raking in the bucks.
You're doing it because you love it. That's why you're doing it.
That's what I tell myself.
Yeah. Well, for one, I coach as well, and it's either some of it's the sport, but a lot of it is the kids. You know, I would say the majority of it is seeing the lights go on.
Yeah, you're right. You're right.
Well, dude, you were responsible for a whole heck of a lot. And did you have kids at this time?
Yeah. Yeah.
What was that like? What was the impact of that like on your marriage?
It was hard. It was,
Mm.
that's one of the reasons why I got out, because wrestling's a very demanding mistress. And I don't know if I kept coaching, I don't know if I'd still be married. Let's put it that way. So I
So
had
you're not coaching currently in Texas. You were coaching
correct.
for 9 years in Southern California.
Yeah.
Now you're in Texas, and
Yeah. It was really hard on my family. Partly because you know, the closest family that my wife had was 2,000 miles away. We really didn't have that good of a community. I mean, we went to church, but you know, every week, but we weren't really what you would call plugged in. Didn't really have a lot of help, and I didn't realize this until later, but my wife needed a lot of help, and in California we didn't have it. So
it's very
after
hard to have a community in Southern California. Very
yes,
difficult.
yeah, and especially since I was working so much, you know, when I was home, I was present but not present. You know, I had to do other stuff. You know, like what I started at school, I'd have to continue at home, and I would just be so doggone tired that it'd be really difficult for me to engage with wife and kids, which is what they needed at that time. They really didn't have a dad.
You were giving
So,
everything to the kid to the sport.
unfortunately, yeah, I was given the best part of myself to the sport.
It's easy to do.
And,
Yeah.
after 9 years, it kind of got to the point where, you know, something had to give. And so that's the short story, but had to stop coaching. And now I go into the room of the current school that I teach. You know, I volunteer maybe a day or two a week, but I just keep it at that. And best decision I made in my life. Well, second to, you know, giving your life to Christ and getting married and all that. One of the best decisions I made.
There you go. One of is good.
There you go. Because
There
my
you
life
go.
is so much better now. I have energy and time to be a dad to my kids and to be a husband to my wife. And that should have been my priority all along, really.
If you had to do it over, if you went back, like
Mhm.
God came down and took you back to when you first started, you got off the U-Haul, you got out of the U-Haul, you had your suit on. Who drives a U-Haul with the suit on? First of all, weird. You know, you're straight out of Compton and you're going into that interview at Capo Valley in Mission Viejo. Do you pull the trigger and do it again? Or
Mm.
what would
Man,
you
that's a
do?
good question. I don't know. Because, you know, on the one hand, throughout my 9 years, I had the pleasure of meeting some really cool people and interacting with students, athletes, and coaches that enriched my life in really good ways. And I had some great experiences. I had some great stories to tell. So I can take that with me for the rest of my life. So had that. And number two, I don't know if I would have been able to get a teaching job in Southern California where I lived at the time without that, because the jobs were so few and far between that I kind of needed the coaching angle to get in. So all of that, but at the same time, if you know, there's, like Thomas Sowell said, there's no solutions, only trade-offs. There's the trade-off, the sacrifice that other people had to make was really, really big. You know, like I just talked about the sacrifice my wife had to make and the sacrifice that my kids had to make. I don't know. I can't say either way.
Well, maybe you
That's
could have
just a hard
could you
question to
have
answer.
taken the coaching thing, got your foot in the door, and then quit later? Would you have been fired from teaching at that time? Did you have a contract that said you had to do both?
No, but it would have been weird. You know, if I would have just been like,
Just explain it to them. Say, God brought me back in time and I've already done this shit. I got your stipend for 9 years. This is like 2 years in. You're saying this.
mhm.
You're like, I just want to teach philosophy now because I've already taught here.
That question is such a hard one to answer. Like, what would you do if you could do it all over again? Because I just can't really envision my life happening any other way. But at the same time, I recognize that there was a hell of a trade-off, negative,
Yeah.
with my family. So I
If
don't know.
if your wife was answering that question, what would she say, you think?
Honey,
Sorry, I shouldn't have put you on the spot like
she's
that.
right here doing work. I don't know. That'd be a good thing for us to talk about. That'd be a great conversation.
Do you believe that time travel is possible? Metaphysically possible?
No,
Okay, so it's a stupid question anyway.
oh, it's still
It's
interesting.
kind of like, well, what if 2 + 2 = 3? What about that? What would you do then? Stupid. It's a stupid question.
No, it's a good one. It's just one that's hard to answer
Yeah.
because the lessons that I've learned along the way and who I've become were so intertwined with that past history. It's just hard to envision my life
Yes.
the other way.
That's right. That's right.
That's not to say, okay, because I know a lot of people are like, I have no regrets. Like, I've got regrets. Like, anybody that says that they have no regrets is either
They're
lying,
lying. Yeah.
not thinking about it hard enough, or they're just being stupid. Because of course you have regrets, but I can acknowledge that even though I have regrets, that I've learned a lot of stuff along the way that has shaped my life in positive ways now. You know, that it's that whole deal. So
Yeah, you
I
bring
don't know,
up
does that make sense?
you brought up Thomas Sowell, and
Yeah.
there you know that's perfect. There are no solutions. There's only trade-offs, and so applying that principle to this question, you got to consider all the things you learned, right?
Mhm.
So what are the trade-offs of learning them differently? That's something people don't
That's-
think about. I want to learn all those same lessons. I want to become the man I am now, but I want to go through it differently. Well,
Yeah. Well,
if
could I
it's
have
hard no
learned-
matter what,
could I have learned those lessons any other way? I don't
Right.
know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
This is getting way too deep and it's kind of creepy. I was like, I had a wrestling coach on. I didn't want it to get deep. I was just like, what do you do?
just keep it on the mat.
Well, I wrestle with these sorts of things. I wrestle with ideas, you know.
Yeah.
Oh, that's good. I
It's
like
a good
that.
connection. You just gave us the title. Rich, what's a typical day for you now that you're not coaching? When you're teaching, what's a typical day?
No, it's
You get
still pretty
what time do you
well
get
done.
up? What time do you get up?
I get up at 5 a.m. now.
What time are you getting up at Capo Valley?
About the same time,
Okay.
but
So
I just wasn't doing a lot that I'm doing now. For instance, so I get up now at 5 a.m. This is when I do my workout in the
okay,
morning.
tell us about your workout. What do you do?
I just have a garage gym. A lot of mostly body weight stuff, like a lot of stuff in the gymnastics rings and
So you lug your own ass around in your garage.
Yeah.
And that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
How long do you do that for?
usually about an hour. And then I'll have
that's a lot.
I'll have a little Bible reading and prayer while I'm stretching.
Uh-huh.
Get the girls up at that time. We have them do their chores, and then before they have the breakfast, I'll read to them. Right now we're reading Animal Farm because it seems timely. So we'll read some literature, we'll do some Bible reading, and then they'll get ready for the day. I'll get ready for the day. Take them to we have a hybrid. So 2 days a week they go to a classical school, and then 2 days a week they're doing homeschool. So it's kind of half and half.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So 2 days a week I'll take them to school. 2 days a week they'll start school at home. I usually get to work at about 8 o'clock. In Texas, schools start later. They don't start at 8, they start at 9. So I get to school at 8, do a little bit of work. School starts at 9. No block scheduling, so you got 50-minute periods every 6 periods throughout the school day. and then school gets
Every
done.
day's the same.
Yeah, pretty much. Every day's the same. And then 4:15, school gets out, maybe work for about another 45 minutes to an hour afterwards, and then go home. And that's a typical day.
Do you miss coaching?
Yes and no.
That's a contradiction.
I,
You didn't just to take logic.
well, maybe I need to go back to logic.
It's actually not a contradiction if you mean yes in one sense and no in the other sense. But of
Right.
course, you already knew that, but I'm saying it for the benefit of everybody else.
I'm just trying to play along with the joke here. Yes, in the sense of part of being a man is like building things. And I enjoyed trying at least to build a program, so I miss that part, and I miss the individuals that I had the pleasure of knowing and coaching. But I don't miss it in the sense that, how should I put this? It was, so the curveballs that I was talking about earlier, where you build into a kid and you pour your heart and soul into him, and then he just pulls that rug out from under you and thinks nothing of it and just walks away right when he's getting good. That happened too many times. And so I don't miss that. That really, maybe it shouldn't have bothered me as much. Maybe I should have gotten used to it, but I never got used to it because I put so much of my heart and soul and energy and everything that I had into building this kid. And then it just like all went to crap in like that,
What do you get out of it internally? I mean, you don't get any money out of it. What do you get out of it internally when a kid sticks with it and succeeds? That bring you a lot of joy
Yeah.
to see that?
Yeah.
Describe that. Like that's happened before. So what is that like?
Well, that's why you do it.
Okay.
I'll give you a specific.
I think maybe you should describe that so people know, because people haven't coached. There's some people that don't know what that's like at all.
Yeah. Well, okay. So there was a kid whose senior year was was my last year of coaching. His name is Gerardo. And he started as like a fourth grader, the first year of our youth club. And so he wrestles fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth grade, comes into our high school program as a ninth grader, does really well as a freshman, does really well as a sophomore, has some tough breaks at the end of the year, but ends up becoming an All-American as a sophomore and as a junior, places at nationals. And then senior year, places third in the state. And it had been a while.
That's awesome.
Since we had a state placer in our program. It was like 2000, 2001 was the last time.
California is a big state.
Yeah. So it's like one division, 980 schools, something like that. It's a ton of schools. So if you place in the state of California, you're pretty legit. And so this kid,
he could write his own ticket, right? You could write a ticket to any program and get a full
well,
scholarship, right?
You got a scholarship to a good college and is still wrestling in college today. And being there for his last match, that was pretty emotional. Being in the corner, and he goes out on top and wins that last match and walks off. And
which is why he wasn't fourth. For those of you keeping track, if you're third, that means you won your last match. Mm-hmm. That's how the numbers work out.
Just getting to hug the kid as he walks off the mat in his last high school match. Yeah, that's a really cool experience. I really can't put it into words. All I can say for your audience is that that made it worth it, because I was there day one, like his first day in the wrestling room when he came in, had never practiced before as a fourth grader, this little chunky fourth grader. And then to see him grow into, over the course of, 8-9 years into this young man that if I tried to wrestle him then as a senior, he would beat me senseless. He would hurt
And
me.
that's not that's not normal, or you're not used to being beaten by your own students.
Well, it happened more often than I like to admit, but he would really ring me out. So being there for that whole process from start to finish, yeah, that was pretty cool. That's pretty cool.
A lot of people don't realize how much training goes into wrestling and how long it takes to get good.
It's year round. It's year round,
It's,
man. You don't get a break.
did you say that you had him as a fourth grader? So you were teaching fourth graders? I think I might have missed that part.
That was the first year where we started our youth program.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he had other coaches as a youth wrestler, but I was there to kind of start the youth program off, and then from time to time we kind of pop back in and would do some things with the youth program. So I had gotten to know him pretty well as an elementary school kid and a middle school kid.
And his last match, did he win by points or by pin?
Yeah, he won by points. He came from behind, and he actually the kid that beat him earlier in the tournament to send him to the consolation bracket was the same kid he wrestled for third place, and he ended up avenging that loss and beating him.
Impressive.
So, yeah, it's pretty good.
That's
so there
awesome.
were
And
a lot of stories like that did make it worthwhile. Yeah.
was he the one that placed the highest in your career from
Mhm.
your students? It's pretty
Yeah.
good. In California, it's really good. I think
Yep.
California is the most populous state in the country now. So you have done very well. Good job, man. Good job. Now you're working on something on your free time. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah. About 2 years ago, started a ministry called the Daniel Collaborative, and it's named after the prophet Daniel. And its aim is I want to play a part in helping solve that formation problem that I talked about in churches. I know that I'm just one small part in a larger effort, larger church effort, but I want to do my part. So the whole aim of the ministry, just in short, is to make Daniels. If you look at the prophet Daniel in the Old Testament, he's kind of he's a timely model, a concrete exemplar for our youth. He faced a lot of opposition, so much more than any of us could ever fathom facing in the West. And at every point in time, he knew what he was standing on. He knew what he was standing against. And he just didn't budge an inch. He was a courageous young man at every point in time when he was opposed. And so I just want to do my part in passing that baton on to the next generation and helping to form young men and women that look like Daniel. So I got a website, danielcollaborative.com. I work with parents, church leaders, and youth. For parents and church leaders, primarily what I want to do is kind of help in the discipleship aspect. I want to help parents figure out how to disciple their kids amidst a busy suburban life. And youth leaders, I kind of want to come alongside them and help do the same, primarily just by telling stories of conversations that I get in the classroom. Because as a philosophy teacher, I get into a lot of conversations about deep fundamental issues with kids every week, almost every day. I've got some sort of story about some sort of conversation. And so I want to tell people, tell parents and tell youth leaders like, hey, this is what's going on in the classroom, in the schools. These are the patterns that I'm noticing. These patterns fit the data that we're seeing about Gen Z. And so now let's figure out, what can we do about it? How should we respond to these patterns in the way that Gen Z is living and thinking and being? So that's primarily what I do with parents and youth leaders, is kind of help that discipleship angle. And then when I work directly with students, I can teach on a lot of apologetical topics that, you know, a lot of others do. But one thing that I do that I think is at least somewhat unique is I'll come in and I'll role play in a conversation. So I'll act as the atheist, and I'll role play in a conversation as an atheist where the, you know, the audience is trying to convince me and I'm talking back to them. We'll go back and forth for 45 minutes to an hour. Then I'll come out of character and we'll debrief. We'll kind of go back over the conversation and ask, okay, how'd you do? What were some things that you had difficulty handling? What were some things that I said that you didn't know how to answer? Let's walk back through all that. And then let's draw some lessons for here's why you should devote time and energy to forming your intellect and forming your mind in a Christian way. So the role play is kind of motivation to help students wake up to their need for apologetics and philosophy, because they're going to get to college and they're going to need it. So you can tell them all day long. You can give them the verses. You can read them the J.P. Moreland quotes from "Love Your God with All Your Mind," and it's like you know, pings off their head and bounces off their head. And they're like, yeah, whatever, and they just dismiss it. But then when you actually get into a conversation where they see their need and they feel the tension and they feel the intensity, like, oh crap, I really don't know how to respond. Then that now you've shown them their need, and they're in touch with it much better, and they're much better motivated to actually go from there and devote part of their day to preparing themselves and preparing their intellects for what's to come. So that's primarily what I do in my spare time.
That's really good. I like it. You're getting them to experience that need in a safe space.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yep.
that's good.
Yeah. It's not an idea that I cooked up. I got it from actually some other Biola guys that came to the program. But yeah, it's a really interactive and engaging teaching, you know. So you can sit there and give them a 25-30 minute sermon, or you can engage them in some sort of back and forth, like a scrimmage, you know. And you said it perfectly, safe environment. These are conversations they are going to have when they get out on their own. They cannot avoid them.
Yeah.
So it's either you have them now and you get to shepherd them through it, or you wait and then they have it when they're out on their own and they don't know what to do with it.
Deal with fallout.
So, yeah. So say in a safe environment is right, you know. So yeah, that, and trying to talk with parents and letting them know, like, this is what's going on in classrooms. This is the patterns that I'm seeing in students. Now let's figure out what to do about it. Pretty fun.
That sounds great.
How long has the Daniel Collaborative been in existence?
About a year and a half, 2 years.
Okay. And it sounds, to me, it sounds like a wrestling match, or it sounds like a wrestling practice where you wrestle and then you debrief and go, what happened there?
Yeah. So
how do you prevent the guy from doing that?
Yeah. That's a really good way to put it. In my coaching experience, the kids that progressed the most and became the most skilled at their sport were the ones that were competing all the time. And they were the one thing that we would do that would give them exposure and give them matches is we would have scrimmages often. So on a Saturday for 2 hours, instead of going to like a 12-hour tournament in the off season, like in the summer, say, we would have a bunch of teams over to our room and we would just run matches. And so you would, in a 2-hour time span, you would get 10 to 12 matches with guys that weren't on your team. And it would be really, really physically tiring. But if you do that a bunch of times, you're going to get really good.
Yeah.
Because those scrimmage matches, like one scrimmage match is like 5 practices, you know. So you can talk about this all day long in your youth group, but are you actually getting into the scrimmages and getting into the conversations where you have to, you know, kind of in a really intense fashion, think and figure out where your weaknesses are and work on those.
Yeah. And it's personal too, because if you keep getting pinned or you keep getting, you know, taken down in a certain way or reversed in a certain way, you really are bothered by, you want to make sure you got to figure out, how do I prevent that, you know,
Yes.
in the future.
Yes. And what you wouldn't be as bothered by it if you didn't compete. if you didn't get into those skirmish matches.
Yes, that's
Right.
right.
You wouldn't see what your weaknesses are, and you wouldn't be motivated to work on them.
You wouldn't know what you don't know.
Yeah,
Exactly.
because it's humiliating.
Exactly.
So you have to be humiliated. I mean, in a fake way. I mean, it's like, but it's still, you know, the guy's pinning you. That's humiliating. It's like, you know.
Yeah.
Well, how do you raise money for that? How do you reach out? How do you get parents to trust you?
That's difficult. Because a lot of the gatekeepers don't really see the value in apologetics and philosophy training. They don't see the role that it plays in solving that retention formation problem. So yeah, it's hard to get people's attention, but you know, you just find people who are already on board and try to work with them and network with them, and
Yeah.
you know, be good at your craft and do a good job in that, and it grows.
Did you have any stories that you wanted to share, little anecdotes about teaching or
Yeah, I can
coaching?
share a couple
Either one.
stories.
Yeah,
Sure.
we want to hear stories. We like stories. Stories are probably the most effective way for us to understand what it's really like.
You're right.
to be.
You're right. Okay, so this is a story that I tell in my talk to parents. It's a talk that I give that's called "What are students thinking?" That's what I was saying earlier. The first part is, here are some patterns of student thinking that I've noticed in my classroom. Here's how it matches the data that we're seeing coming out about Gen Z. And then part two is what do we do about it? How should we then disciple? So this is a story that I tell in that talk. This one comes from my English class, and it happened about, I think, a little over a year ago. So it was during pandemic schooling, and the unit that we had just finished, the culminating project was students had to build a town. It was like they had to make a PowerPoint presentation about this fictitious town that they created that was like centering around their own values and what they cared about and whatnot. And they had to do a presentation on it. And so every single student in the classroom, in my English classes, had as a central value in their town, in our town or in my town, you can be who you want to be. You can do you. You know, no limits, no judgment. You get to be who you are without people pushing you to be someone else. Maybe it was worded a little differently from presentation to presentation, but that was like from Jump Street, their central thing in their town. And so one girl gets up there and she says that. And so I'm starting to press a little bit with some questions. And so I go, okay, who is the poster child, like the exemplary citizen in your town? So she thinks for a second and she goes, Willow and Jaden Smith. I said, well, why? Well, she says their edgy lifestyles were rejected by the Black community. So, okay, well, what do you mean by edgy? You know what she means by edgy, right? They're sexually promiscuous lifestyle. I think Willow is even like polyamorous or something. I don't know, but according to the student, Willow was, polyamorous. So anyway, okay, so their edgy lifestyles were rejected by the Black community. And so I go, well, is there anybody that you would reject in your town? Is there anybody
That's very good. That's very good.
That you would not let in?
You're forcing people to be themselves, right?
Yeah. So she goes, no, there's nobody that I would reject and kick out of my town. I said, well, nobody? She goes, nobody. So I go, okay, what about Donald Trump? And I didn't say that to defend Trump or anything. I was like trying to find her point of tension.
What was this? What year was this? Just for context.
This was right before, or maybe it was right after the election.
15, 16?
No, this was during the pandemic.
Oh, sorry. So I missed that. Sorry. And this is at your current high school?
Yeah.
In
Texas. Yeah. And so immediate negative visceral reactions. It's like, oh, hell no. Trump would have to go. No, Trump's in my town. Like, no way am I letting him in. Or just like 10 seconds ago, she was like, all Miss Diversity, So I go, okay, all right.
So Trump can't do himself.
Right. Exactly. So it's like,
Do-
okay, so
He can't do to himself. Yeah.
there's some people that you have limits on that whole principle you were talking about earlier. Like you can do you have limits on that, right? So okay, well I guess I do. And so I go, well, all right, let's think back to what you said about Willow and Jaden Smith. Let's say that tomorrow you find concrete, irrefutable scientific proof that the polyamorous lifestyle is bad for society, and then it's bad for that individual, and it's just bad all around. It leads to harm. And this is irrefutable scientific proof. Would you put any limits on that in your town? And she goes, no. So I go, well, why not? She goes, well, it's all about choice. I can't get in the way of somebody's choices. If they want that, then good for
Except
them.
Donald.
Except Donald. And I'm not gonna get in their way. It's like, wait a minute, you've found irrefutable scientific proof that it's harmful, and you're still not going to limit it. She goes, yeah, I can't limit a person's choice. And so she was just all about choice. And everybody in the audience was like, yeah, no duh, Bordner, why are you even asking these questions?
So they're
So-
following the science.
Yeah. Well, no, they're rejecting the science. Okay.
I
But
know. I'm just kidding.
in this anecdote, what I think this shows is
Hold on. They're rejecting the science and they're Republicans. Hold on. I'm taking notes. Hold on. So they're rejecting the science and they're wait, they're not hold on. Hold on. They're rejecting. Okay. Sorry. I'm taking notes.
so I think the patterns of thinking that we see from this story is, number one, they're really, really inordinately individualistic, not in a healthy way, but like in the Disney way, like you do you. Okay. And that at the same time, paradoxically, they're very, very conformist. It's like, why do all the nonconformists dress alike? Because they're all saying the same message, and you can't.
That's really good.
You can't get them to question it. Like
That's
you
really
can't.
good. Yeah.
It's really hard to shake them out of it because
Yep.
it's what they've been taught for 12 or 13 years. So
Yeah.
if
That's
every
good.
Disney movie that they've watched has that same message, if they see that on TikTok day in, day out, and every teacher in their school is saying the same, you do you, just be yourself, love yourself theme, they're going to conform to it. Okay. And so why are we surprised when they go, off to the deep end? Well, they're just following what they've been taught. They're conformist. They don't think they are. They think that they're individuals and nobody, tells them what to think and what to believe, and they're their own person, blah, 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 blah. But they're really, really conformist.
Has that been effective with anybody? Do you see the light bulbs going on at all?
My hope is that later it bothers them. But in the conversation itself, they tend to be really dogmatic and dig in their heels. Like you even saw that in that story that I just told. Like I'm just popping the bubble really obviously, and it's really easy to do. But they're just digging in their heels and just doubling down on really, really, really silly stuff. Like obviously nobody believes that it's all about choice and you can't get in the way of somebody's choices and you do you. Like nobody believes this stuff. They just believe it when it's convenient. And so then you pop their bubble and you show them the lie, and they'll double down. They'll end up saying like really, really obviously stupid stuff that if they really thought about it for a second, they wouldn't say. But they're just doing it to defend turf.
Yeah, that happened when I was teaching the definition of marriage, and just this is back when the court was trying to redefine it for the rest of us by judicial fiat. I used those court decisions in my logic classes, and we would talk about the logical implication of rejecting, for example, Prop 8. Prop 8 in 14 words defined what marriage had always been in California, at least just in terms of necessary conditions. And it was on the ballot in 2008, yes or no. those were the options. Yes or no. This shall continue to be, except for is in the state constitution. And so if you say no to that set of necessary conditions, what are you saying yes to? That was not on the ballot. And so you had to think about what is the definition of marriage then? What are you saying it is? And my students would say the craziest things you've ever heard. I mean, if it was actually on TV as pro no on 8, which is the side that lost in the election of that year. But they would saying, yeah, you can marry your grandpa, because they would start with a slogan like love wins or some crap like that. And I'd say, do you love your grandpa? And, I love Aristotle. Can I marry a dead person? I love Walmart. Can I marry a non-person? And they would double down like, yeah, you can marry your grandpa. Yeah. And if I had captured that in video and just made a commercial for the no on 8 side, they would have lost probably by much larger margins. And I think the court would have had a much harder time striking down the common sense English dictionary language-based definition of marriage.
It reminds me of that viral video, or I forget who did it, but the guy was on college campus asking students, it's like, well, what if he was like a white guy, probably about my height. It's like, what if I identify as a 6'5" Chinese woman? Would you go along with that? And they're like, yeah, I would,
Yeah.
You wouldn't. Stop playing. No, you wouldn't. Like, be honest with yourself and stop playing language games.
So what you're doing is you have the confidence that people are just very tempted to BS and not be honest and just bullshit.
Mm-hmm.
And education for you is exposing that and forcing kids to face it.
A little bit.
That's very helpful, I think.
Yeah. I mean, okay, look, I'll say this. I don't want to come off like I'm blaming the kids and pointing the finger at them. They're like this because this is the environment they've been raised in.
People are
They're like this because the adults are like this.
Yeah, all people are like this. My college classes, I mean, the voters are like this.
It's the mentoring they're getting.
Yeah, it's a very human thing.
That's right.
And I think my goal, the way I put it, is I'm trying to thaw the dogmatism. I'm not trying to indoctrinate. I don't want to convert your kid, but I just want to ask some questions to help that student lead the examined life, because most don't. And that's a shame, because if you don't lead the examined life, to borrow another phrase from centuries ago, you're living a life of quiet desperation. And we have too many citizens in our country right now leading lives of quiet desperation. And so I want to help them go deeper and, yes, be honest with themselves and what they really believe, and actually figure out what they really believe. And then, take those beliefs for a test drive. Do they work? Yeah. Are they true? That's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to help them engage in that process in the first place, because most haven't at all. And then B, maybe come to some sort of conclusions in that process. So thawing the dogmatism is how I put it.
That's great.
Like that.
What do you have any other anecdotes? You gave us one. Do you have another one?
Yeah, I can tell another one. Let me think here. Okay, here's another one.
This is so good, Rich. You have the depths of experience. I can tell, man. You have been through it, dude. And you are a public hero. I really do regard you. I regard any public school teacher that does what you do as a hero.
Well, thank you. I don't know about that, but I do have some stories to tell. So, by the way, this is one of the things that I do in my talk. I want to continually tell parents, like, this is what's going on, because, like,
yes,
I don't know, people need to hear this. So, please. Okay, so
hold on one sec. One sec. Okay, so you got another story for us.
Yeah, this is what I really like to do. I get really passionate when I start telling stories because these are really, really fun conversations that I get in. Next one comes from my philosophy class. It was right after we did a unit on morality, specifically the question whether morality is objective or subjective.
Mm.
We watched a debate where Greg Kokel debated a Canadian philosophy professor. And so after that, we're having a Socratic discussion. And some of the kids, like they're all over the place, but they don't realize it. Okay. One girl, who's a black girl, she's doubting whether slavery is really wrong. And so she's like, and I asked her, like, hey, let me back up a little bit. So she says, like at the outset, like, no, there's no real right and wrong. It's all subjective. It's all based on personal preference, blah, blah, blah. And so I said, well, okay, is slavery wrong? And she goes, it's like she's waffling back and forth. Like she can't decide. Like, yes, yeah, it's wrong. Wait a minute, no, because they were raised that way, and it was back then, it was a different society. So who am I to judge? Like, well, what am I saying? Like, of course it's wrong. Well, I mean, and it's like, oh, I don't know if it's wrong or not. And everybody was kind of like nodding along with her. So that was one thing. And then another part of the conversation, one of the students gets really dogmatic about it, and he starts just barking relativism. And you can't budge this kid. And he's like totally, it's like, yeah, we think the Nazis were wrong, but who are we to judge? Like all that whole thing, the whole 9 yards. And so I start asking questions and kind of showing that that's a little bankrupt and they might want to rethink that. And the rest of the class at one point in time, like he just doubles down, like he won't budge. And the rest of the class turns against him. And they're like moaning every time he's like, yeah, the Nazis, but who are we to judge? Like, we don't know, like, because that was their society and this is how we're raised. And everybody's like, oh my gosh, like they can't stand him talking. But then I go like, wait a second, guys, just 30 seconds ago, you were all saying the exact same thing. You were saying the exact same thing he was saying with a straight face. It's just now that he's saying it and you're hearing it played back at you, you can't stand it. Like, well, you got to make a decision. You can't play the fence. Like you can't be heads I win, tails you lose. You have to either some things are really right and wrong and we can know it, or not, and quit playing both sides here. And so that was a really cool conversation because they didn't realize the stuff that they were reacting against was the very same things that they were saying just a minute ago. And I have that happen all the time.
Yeah.
It's like this massive cognitive dissonance, like they don't really connect the dots until somebody else does.
Yeah. And you have to have the courage to do that. I mean, first of all, you have to have the ingenuity to come up with this pedagogy. And then you have to have the courage to carry it through. So to point out the BS.
Yeah,
I mean, the inconsistency,
yeah.
I mean, just to push them to a point where they see their own tendency, what they're doing, because that's the main. It's the same in college. It's the same in college. I mean, I will go a little bit further than you will in college. I mean, well,
it's the same in the workplace. It's everywhere. It's the same everywhere.
Yeah. Here, can I tell one more?
Of course. Yeah. This is long form. This is Joe Rogan style.
Okay. So I'll preface it by saying this.
Just make sure you squeeze it into 30 seconds because people have such low attention spans.
I don't know if I can do that. I'll give it a try.
Easier. Yeah.
That was a joke. That was a joke.
As a preface, I'll say that most of the kids that are Christian or claim to be Christian or whatever, even the conservative ones, it's hard to tell the difference when you get into these conversations between them and your more secular kids. What happens a lot is usually in a conversation, the more secular kids are the more aggressive ones. And so they'll start a conversation by just asserting with the utmost supreme confidence their view. Like they won't argue for it. They'll just assert it like it's, talking about the sun rising or something. And then they'll act kind of like sheepdogs. You know how sheepdogs like nip at the heels of the herd and kind of get all the cows or the sheep or whatever in line, kind of going in the same direction. And so they'll do these sort of rhetorical tactics and assert their confidence and kind of get everybody else in line. And most kids, 95, 98% of kids are really, really susceptible to those kind of like socialization, lunchroom shaming tactics. Okay. Except for this one kid. And I call him the skunk at the garden party. He wasn't a Christian kid. He was a Muslim kid. Okay. He was the one kid
That's
that
racist.
had no problem. All right, whatever. But he had no problem, staring down the rest of the class and confidently criticizing what everybody else was saying and just kind of be like, here I stand, I can do no other. And he did a really good job of it too. But he was the one kid that was not cowed by those other, like the tactics of the confident secular kids. And one day I was trying to figure out where this comes from. And then I figured it out. One day I heard him in a conversation and he's talking about macro and micro evolution. I'm like, what other, like, I've never heard a high school kid use those terms before. Those are terms of art from intelligent design.
Yeah, that's right.
Only the nerds know. And so I'm like, my ears perked up. And then after class, I pull him over and I say, dude, where did you learn those terms? Where did you learn to talk like that? And he goes, well, my dad is, he reads a lot of theology. He reads a lot of, the Muslim word for apologetics. And he teaches me and my siblings at home this stuff. And so I was like, that's why he's so confident. That's why he's able to stand there and not fall prey to the sheepdog tactics of everybody else, because he gets it at home. His dad disciples him explicitly and effectively at the dinner table. And whenever I go to churches and I talk to parents, I tell them that story. It's like, of course, this kid's a Muslim. I was like, buddy, I kind of wanted to tell him, like, you're on the wrong team. I wish we had you in the church. But we need more of that. We need more people taking a step back from the suburban hustle, like the constant endless chauffeuring of kids to program to program to program, and devoting more time to explicit discipleship in the home.
Yeah.
Not just reading your Bible and praying, that's a good start, but teaching the apologetics, teaching the philosophy, taking the kids through the questions and the issues that they're going to run into when they're in classes and when they're on social media and stuff. Because if you don't, it's on you. If not you,
they're going to be in the sheep. And
Yeah.
You don't know who the sheepdog is nipping at the heels.
Yeah, if you think about it, we've got a problem of math in the church. I think a lot of families, they expect the youth group to do this kind of discipling. It's like, well, if you're putting that on the youth group, even the best pastors who are doing yeoman's work and who are awesome pastors, they get your kid for 2 hours a week. How many hours a day does the public school system get your kid for? How many hours a day is TikTok getting your kid for? It's not a fair fight. So mom and dad, you've got to even the playing field a little bit by doing some explicit discipleship in the home along these lines.
And I can hear a lot of parents going, oh yeah, right. Where am I going to find the time for that? But
the parents are not ready for that. The parents don't even know how to do that.
Well, there's that issue too. The parents need the education. Yes. But even fitting it in, it's as simple as having a dinner together, having a meal together. And that's one of the things we do. I got 5 kids. I know how hard it is to fit things in. We'll do morning prayer or evening prayer together as a family. And then the kids ask questions. Well, what about this? What about that? Or so-and-so said this the other day at school. And that's where the conversation happens. That's where the discipling happens.
Exactly. You just have to make it explicit. You can't be like, well, we're going to get to it whenever it comes up, because then it's not, you know. And I know what you say, like,
Yeah.
because I live the same life too. It's a busy life. But part of what my ministry is helping people figure out how to do that and how to make that manageable. So it's not like this big thing that just like wears you down. Like if you just keep a few principles.
That's a huge thing right there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Someone's going to go, oh, wait, it's not going to wear me down. Hold on.
It doesn't have
Tell
to.
me more about that.
It might
Yeah,
actually
me
give
about
you
that.
more energy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like you just,
Develop that.
there's a very simple game plan that if you just keep a few principles in mind, it makes it manageable and it's not this overwhelming thing. You
Yeah.
know, you don't have to reinvent the wheel and every morning have a half-hour sermon ready to go. That's not what we're talking about here. We're just talking, like you said, at the dinner table, like a 5 or 10 minute thing.
Mhm.
You know, we live in an age where we have such an embarrassment of riches of resources available to us.
Yeah.
Where you don't have to,
Yes.
you don't have to come up with the answers. Like other people do that work for you.
Yeah.
You know?
So how do the parents get leveled up to where they can effectively run this 5-minute thing that you're talking about? Like, how do they know they're being effective?
Yeah.
Where do they get that kind of training and guidance?
Well, that is step
Mentoring.
number one, is taking your own training seriously. And it doesn't have to be like PhD level stuff.
Mm-mm.
Piled high and deep.
Just reading 15 to 20 minutes a day. If you do that consistently over time, every day, that's like what, 15 books a year. And that's not nothing. That's a good chunk of learning.
Yeah.
You know, if you do that for a year and you look back on where you started, you will have seen yourself intellectually come really, really far in just a really short amount of time. It's just, you have to be consistent about it. And do you have that 15 to 20
And you got to pick the right books.
Yeah. Do you have that 15 to 20 minutes a day? I guarantee you, no matter how busy you are, you do. You just kind of have to look at how you spend your time already, and you'll find some downtime and redeem that downtime. So for example, on your commute to work, like my commute to work is 20 minutes. And so buy an Audible book, buy a book from JP Moreland, and listen to that while you're on your way to work. That's 20 minutes. Better yet, if you can hack it, put it on time and a half. And that's now in your 20-minute commute, now you're getting 30 minutes in.
Yeah.
Rather than watching that TV show, that Netflix show at night before you go to bed, do you really need that? That's another 30 minutes. When you're in the shower, put on the Audible book. That's another 10 to 15 minutes. You know, there's
Or
like
bring the book into the shower. That's what I do.
You could do that, but that's like, you know, you find these little chunks of time that you can redeem, and you just use that every single day.
I bet there's many dads that could just leave a book on the top of the toilet and they'd get that thing book more than 15 minutes a day.
Amen. And here's another thing. You have to rethink your relationship with your cell phone too.
Amen.
Because for most students and for most adults, that is a rectangular heroin needle sitting in their pocket. And it's very, like, they pay a lot of people who are really smart millions of dollars to make sure that your eyes are glued to that screen as much as possible, and they're really good at it. For you to try to white knuckle it, and which means like just try to resist without really tweaking your environment, that is like putting a bit of heroin in a heroin addict's pocket and then expecting him to abstain from it. So you've got to radically rethink your environment and your relationship with the cell phone and really knock that thing down to size. And then, yes, you will find more time. Like, you will, instead of scrolling when you're sitting there, right, on Facebook,
Right.
you'll have some time to read a couple pages.
Yeah.
You know, and it just adds up. You know, it doesn't have to be like this big, I'm going to get a college degree thing. Just redeem the time that you already have.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, that's really good. So
That's what I do
basically,
in my life.
yeah, you're challenging parents to be better parents, basically.
Yeah. And, you know, I run into some parents, I hear this a lot too, where they're like, yeah, I don't need that. I've got my testimony. If anybody asks, I will tell them the difference Jesus has made in my life, but I really don't get into that apologetical stuff. I don't get in the arguing. I don't get in the answering objections. That's just not me. It's like, okay, let me take that for granted. Let me just say, okay on that. But what about your kids? Like, your kids need you to have a solid Christian intellect. They need you to be able to answer the questions, because they're getting, trust me, absolutely bombarded with lies and crap day in and day out. You don't even know the half of it. They probably don't even know the half of it because they're swimming in the stuff.
Mhm.
And so if they can't come to you for guidance through these really thorny intellectual questions, these hot button issues, where else can they go? So if for no other reason, you're going to need to train your mind so that you can help them persevere.
Yeah. Yes.
There endeth the sermon.
Well said.
Where can people find out more about how to support what you're doing and get involved? Tell us again.
My website is danielcollaborative.com, and it's spelled as in Daniel the prophet and then the word collaborative. And I just named it collaborative because, I know, like I said earlier, I'm not a one-man show. I'm just collaborating with people who are already in these kids' lives, so we're all just working together on the same team. So I've got our services there. I've got a blog there where I write about a lot of stories from the classroom, various videos, various content. So it's all there.
What about book suggestions? Do you have that? If somebody wanted to take your advice tomorrow, what would you suggest as far as a book?
Well, if they email me at info@danielcollaborative.com, I'll send them a book list where it's got a list of books on pretty much most issues you could think about, like three or four books. I should put that on my website, come to think of it. But yeah, if they email me, I'll send it to them. And I got various other resources. So I think if I could pick one book, man, let me think here. I should have come ready for this question.
That's all right.
Okay. I haven't read this book, but it's one that I've heard a lot of good stuff about. It's the new one by Natasha Crane. Gosh, what is it called? Let me look it up here. Hold on a second. I'll give you. There we go. Faithfully Different. It's called Faithfully Different. The subtitle is Regaining Biblical Clarity in a Secular Culture.
And why are you confident about this book if you haven't read it?
I've just heard a couple of podcasts where she kind of gives a synopsis of the book, and it sounds like it's really timely. But I have read two of her other books, Talking to Your Kids About God and Keeping Kids on God's Side.
So she's not one of these woke people that is asleep.
Quite the opposite. And in those other two books, each chapter is like a different question that kids might have or that they might get, and helping the parent kind of walk their kid through those questions. So those are good books. Those are good places to start. Greg Koukl's books are really good. I probably should have led with this. His book on relativism, Feet Firmly Planted in Midair, is a classic. That's 20 some years old, but it's evergreen. His book called Tactics. It's a book on learning how to converse and talk with people, not just like sermonize, but actually have a conversation with them that's edifying.
Yeah.
That's a really good book. If you want to go a little bit more kind of heavy sledding, two books that are really timely is one of them is J.P. Moreland's book called Kingdom Triangle. That's a really good one. And then Carl Trueman's book, The Rise and Triumph of the Modern Self. That one's really difficult. It's pretty thick stuff, but if you can get through it, it'll really help you understand kind of like what the craziness of our moment is all about and where it comes from. Like, these ideas have their genesis. They kind of feel like they just arose yesterday, but they've been kind of percolating for a couple hundred years now, and it's just now kind of come to a head. So he does a really good job of explaining that whole process and where these ideas come from and what we need to do about them. So those are just a couple of books that I'd recommend.
That's helpful. Thank you.
Yeah.
sorry,
No, I just said very cool.
do you have one final story for us?
Yeah. Yeah.
It could be anything, something from your experience.
Okay.
Because your stories are very helpful, I think. I mean, we should have you back just for you. We should just wind you up and say a story time with Rich Bordner.
I'm all for it, man. I can go on and on. Okay. Here's one. This one happened last year. It was in my philosophy class.
Because some people are blown away that not everybody is Republican in Texas, and it's not in the drinking water, and the kids don't show up with cowboy boots in Copenhagen and their lip, and they're all, yeah, Cruz, or whatever. I mean, Beto almost beat Cruz, so you gotta, hey, dude, you gotta be aware of this.
Yep. Yeah, people say it to me somewhat frequently. They kind of act like and believe like Texas is this conservative haven. And it ain't no California, that's for sure, but it's more secular than progressive than you might realize. I mean,
It's under attack.
Public schools are still public schools. It's not like they're any different here than what you would find almost anywhere else in the country. Same influences.
Yep.
So anyway, this was in my philosophy class, and
D just ain't just a grade.
we were in a unit on gender, and in that unit, they watched a debate on abortion. And so afterwards, we were talking about it. And just like I said last time, if there were any pro-life kids in the class, they were quiet about it, or they were really apologetic about it. It's like, yeah, I'm personally pro-life, but I would never tell a woman what to do with their body, that sort of thing. But most of the kids,
not apologetic in the good sense.
yes, exactly. Apologetic is in I'm sorry, like I'm apologizing for my point of view, kind of like being really timid about it.
Well, that's how Jesus was.
Yeah, exactly. And most of the kids that were outspoken, not most, all, were stridently pro-choice. And so just like
that's a shocker,
right? Just like with the last conversation I talked about, I started asking questions because, again, I just want to thaw their dogmatism. I want to try to get them to slow down and to chill and to, think about what they're saying at a deeper level. And so I do what Scott Klusendorf, he's a pro-life debater, what he calls trotting out the topic.
He's coming on our podcast next week, I think.
Oh, yes? Okay, we'll tell him the story then, okay? Because I think it will encourage him. And so I do what's called trot out the toddler. Because what they're saying is like, the abortion is okay if the child is unwanted. Abortion is okay if the mother can't afford the child, all those sorts of things. And so I was like, all right. So I've got a 2-year-old in front of me. And should this mother be able to kill the 2-year-old because the child is unwanted, or whatever she was saying at the time, that the student, I just put that out there and then gave her that scenario. And I'll never forget what this student said. The student, without blinking, with a straight face, said, yeah, the mother, if the child is unwanted and reminding her of a trauma she experienced in her past, yeah, she should be able to, quote, get rid of, AKA kill that child. Just said that with a straight face. And I'm like, guys, did you just hear what you just said? You're like, yeah.
Future Beto voter.
And so I just kind of I was like gobsmacked. I didn't know how to respond, even though every time I have this conversation, there's always somebody that says that. There's always a handful that take that position. So I guess I shouldn't be surprised at it. And one of the students said, it's like, Mr. Bordner, I really don't think you realize how desensitized to value in life we are. And she said,
are you serious?
Yeah, she said that not as like as like it's a good thing. Like she said it not as a way to say like, yeah, it's a shame that we think this way. She was like, just, yeah, we're just desensitized. We just don't care. I don't think you realize how much we don't care. And she was saying it like it was a good thing. Like she was just talking about facts, you know? So I was like, yeah, okay, I think I'm coming to that realization now.
Well,
Just say it just to the face, man.
if you think about it from a child's perspective, particularly, right? Like that's just coping. I'm a child and I might be unwanted, and it's okay to, and all, you know, like that's like the logical extension of abortion being okay, right? So if it's okay there, then it's got to be okay here, because we know that cognitively, they know life is when it starts. They know when it starts. It's obvious. And it's like their way of coping with that worry. They have to not care, or they'll be worried that they could be killed.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. It was
Well,
It was just unexpected.
in my college classes, I always go a step further, and I know you can't because these are minors and you got to be sensitive to their development, which is, but when I'm getting full adults, right? I'm getting allegedly full adults, and I'll usually just point out that you're probably a Democrat.
Thank you for that qualifier, allegedly.
You know, the person defending Nazis. It's never the Republican. It's never that person. So it's just, it's funny that how the some of the reputation, or I don't know how this happens, but it's exactly the opposite as what's happening on campus as far as what I'm seeing. The craziness, the denial of truth. I once asked a classroom, just we were talking about morality and whether there was such a thing as moral truth. I asked, is it true that rape is wrong? And this is in Los Angeles, a district that went for Hillary by 80%. And they said, no one said it's true that rape is wrong. Not a single person. And ironically, one of the main objections to Hillary's opponent was some kind of alleged concern about sexual assault or something like that. And it was, anyway, you just don't believe it until you see it with your own eyes. You see the inconsistency and the BS. It's just BS. So, but anyway, this is really valuable. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, you're right. In that story I just told about the abortion conversation, I was expecting them to say like, oh no, that's different because the 2-year-old's person and the unborn is not. So we would have that conversation where I kind of showed that there's some differences there, but they're not morally relevant, but they just totally took it in that direction. They bit the bullet and were like, yeah, that'd be fine if mom did that. And I guess I should stop being surprised by it, because it's not the first time and not the last time that I had that reaction out of them. Like
I'd be curious to know where their line of demarcation is. Like, when is it not okay? Like, is it 8?
Yeah.
Is it your age? Is it,
That's a great question. I should start asking.
They hate Donald Trump because, which you've mentioned, right? So you brought that up. I didn't bring it up.
Mm-hmm.
They hate Donald Trump because he discriminates and he violates people's rights. But the issue of rights is what you're really talking about. Do you even have rights? Does a human being have even the basic right not to be murdered? That's what good are your other rights if you don't have a right not to be murdered? If you have a right to own property or a right to be yourself and you do you, it's such a foundational. That's why I do really like the abortion debate, is because it is so foundational.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Just the other day in my English class, there was that very question came up, because actually this is the one pro-life student. Okay. So in my English classes, they just finished a research project, and one of the students did it on abortion, and he took the pro-life position. And so they had to make presentations. And so he gets up there and starts making the pro-life case, and immediately triggers a bunch of the class, like some of the girls, as he is making his presentation, they're like, get him, girls. Like, they actually said that. One girl goes, when it came time for question and answer, it's like, all right, let's get them. Like sick them or something. So they start like peppering him with questions and start like being really aggressive. And he actually did a really good job of answering their questions to the point where at the end, like I kept my mouth shut and just kind of, because he was doing a great job. He didn't need me to, butt in. At the end, the girls that were really aggressive and were saying like, get him girls, like, oh no, he didn't say that. Like at the end, they were going, you actually asked some questions that made me think. I'll have to think about what you said. I was like, dude, awesome. It's the one kid in
That's
my
awesome.
in my
That's-
years in
yeah,
my
that's
years
true.
in school that has taken like a strong pro-life position and done a good job.
That's a great case for free speech. I mean, just let the kids hash it out.
Yeah. Yeah. But Lucas, he brought up that very question, that very point you made, like where do rights come from and how is it grounded? And awesome.
I was the kid that you're referring to in my high school. I had an atheist. He called himself a Buddhist, but let's just say what it was. He's an atheist. He's an atheist. He was an atheist history teacher named Mr. Melbach. And Pete Melbach is what his name was. And he taught, I think he was the coach of the girls soccer team for a while. But anyway, he taught world history, and somehow abortion came up in that class. I'm not really quite sure how that happened, but he did a debate. I don't know. He was one of these old school liberals where, he believed in free speech. And I had written an article in the school newspaper. That might have been what it was. Who knows? But it was on abortion. I'm just not sure how he fitted into the curriculum. but he said, let's debate, and it was me against the whole class. And there was other pro-lifers in there, at least two, but they were too quiet. So I was on my own. And it was, of course, I had already written the school newspaper article, but it was. And the funny thing is at the time, I remember I wrote another article on gun control, and I remember people telling me, these are just culture war issues. These are not going to be enduring issues. And it's just like, I didn't believe it now. And here we are still dealing with it. Amazing, amazing prediction. Because they really are such foundational issues. The question of what are rights, what rights do you have, what responsibilities you have, are the flip side of that coin. You have a responsibility to respect the rights of other people. And is that arbitrary, or is there can you make some sense of that?
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, we salute you, dog. We salute you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Absolutely.
Well, Rich, thank you for coming on and sharing all of your experience, not all of it, but some of it. And
Thanks for having
we
me.
would love to have you come back, because we're a pro K through 12 done right podcast.
Awesome, man. Yeah, let's do this again. It was fun.
Yeah.
Okay. Sounds good. Well, now that you're not coaching and working 80 hours a week.
Yeah, I got to do something with my time.